I've been begging Google for a flagship Android-powered laptop for years. Well, today I finally have what I've always wanted. Or do I? My name is Scott, and I'm here to tell you everything you need to know about this brand new Google product, the aptly named Googlebook. So I'm sure you have questions, and I'm here to give you as many answers as I can. So I'm going to break this down into 3 sections. What is a Googlebook? What can you do with it? And when will you actually be able to get one? Right away, you'll notice that Google isn't reinventing the wheel here. From the images I've seen, the Googlebook looks like any other clamshell laptop. There are some interesting things here though, like this strip of light on the lid. Google is calling that the glow bar. Apparently every Googlebook will have one, so it will be easy to identify them when you see one. This will be helpful because multiple brands are making Googlebooks, with each bringing their own unique style to the line. But that glow bar will tie them all together. I'll talk more about the brands involved with this in a bit, but it's important to note that the glow bar isn't just for aesthetics. Google says that it will be functional in some way. I might have an idea of what Google has in mind here because my laptop has a light bar on the lid too. This is the Asus ROG Zephyrus G16 from 2025, and the light bar can do random patterns or be functional by showing me how much battery life is left. Google may just be taking this concept and expanding on it with full RGB color and maybe things like notification flashes or even pulsing to music. As a guy who loves RGB lighting, I am really excited about what the glow bar will be able to do. Another unique hardware element is the G key on the keyboard, placed where you would typically find the Windows key on a Windows laptop. Unfortunately, it is unclear what this key actually does. The G could be referring to Google, so one would assume that hitting it would bring up a Google search or maybe some sort of universal search bar that searches the web, your local files, your phone, or what have you. But the G could instead be referencing Gemini, which would also make a lot of sense. However, there's a different way to access Gemini that doesn't require you hitting the keyboard at all, so I'm not sure if that's actually going to pan out. I'll talk more about accessing Gemini soon because that's a huge part of Googlebooks. In this image, we see that there's a fingerprint reader on Googlebooks right next to what look like traditional function keys. And hey, that G key is also next to traditional Control and Alt keys. Putting this all together, it appears that Google isn't doing with Googlebooks what it did with Chromebook keyboards. If you've never used a Chromebook before, the keyboard is very different from Windows and Mac keyboards, which creates a pretty big learning curve for people unfamiliar with them. From these images though, it looks like Google is playing it safe and keeping the standard keyboard layout we all already know and use every day. And the final hardware piece here is the ports. Google's only shown us one side of this particular Googlebook, but we see that it has a full-size HDMI port, a USB-C port, and what I assume is a combination headphone and microphone jack. This bodes well too because, once again, these are the ports people want on laptops. Google isn't trying to go against the grain by only putting one USB-C port in or something lame like that. I really want to know what's on the other side of this laptop, but for now, I'm happy to see that it's looking like Google is sticking to what works. Before I dive into what you can do with a Googlebook, I want to call quick attention to this tagline: featherweight design, heavyweight power. What does that mean? Featherweight design is pretty self-explanatory as this looks like a thin and light laptop. But heavyweight power? What chip is going to be powering this thing? Google hasn't divulged that yet, but I have some guesses I'll tell you about at the end. For now, let's jump into the next thing on the list here, which is what can you do with a Googlebook? Well, from what you've already seen so far, you can tell this is a pretty standard layout. You've got your taskbar with a bunch of apps, a desktop with widgets and icons, and all that usual stuff. But unless you've been living in a cave over the past 2 years, you won't be surprised to hear that Gemini and AI in general are the real stars of the Googlebook show. Just in case there's any confusion though, yes, the underlying operating system for Googlebooks is Android. You can even see that the desktop icons are themed with Material U, just like they are on Android, and the whole aesthetic of this desktop just screams Android and Pixel. However, Google is trying to change our mindset about the term operating system and calling the software here an intelligence system. That's pretty cringe, I've got to say, but I'm trying to hold back my opinion on this until I've actually had the chance to use a Googlebook. Regardless, Gemini is integral to the way things work with this laptop, and it starts with your mouse cursor. If you think about it, the mouse cursor hasn't changed in decades and is basically the same across all desktop operating systems. But with Google Books, it will be updated to what Google is calling a magic pointer. When you shake the pointer, it becomes super powered and calls upon Gemini to do various things. One example Google showed me is generating a new image from two separate images. First, you shake the cursor to initiate a Gemini prompt. Then you click the two images so Gemini knows what it's working with. Then, based on the context of the images, Gemini determines what you might want to do, and all you need to do is click that pre-configured command. After a few seconds of Gemini working on it, you get a new image that combines the two original images together. Unfortunately, that's the only real example Google gave us of Magic Pointer, so I don't know what else to tell you about it. But since Googlebook software is just Android at the core, I do know that it will heavily integrate with your Android phone. Google gave multiple examples of this, like a feature called Quick Access, which allows you to easily remotely access all the files saved on your phone right from your laptop. This is something I can already do on my Windows laptop, but it's slow and clunky. The way Google shows this, it should be much faster and smoother. Another feature is called Cast My Apps. This allows you to operate your Android phone as if it were right there with you. The example Google gave us was that you want to make sure you keep your Duolingo streak for the day, but your phone is in your backpack in another room. There's no need to go get the phone. Just open up the app on your Googlebook, do your stuff, and that's it. To be clear, this is not an app that is installed on the Googlebook. This is the app on your phone that's in the other room. You're just using your phone through your laptop. It's unclear how this will be secured though. It's possible you'll need to use the Googlebook's fingerprint scanner before you can interact with your phone. If that's true, Google didn't show it in the demos, so I'm not confident that's the case quite yet. One final feature here is called Create My Widget. This is exactly what it sounds like. You initiate Gemini and ask it to make a desktop widget for you based on whatever you need. In this example, it's about a family trip to one of my favorite cities in the world, Berlin. For this widget, Gemini pulls from your various Google services, including Gmail, Calendar, Maps, and more, to create a fully personalized desktop widget that was made just for you. I've covered a lot here, but there's one more thing to talk about, which is when you'll actually be able to get one of these. So far, Google has told us that 5 companies are making Google Books. You'll notice that one name is conspicuously missing, which is Samsung. Google told me that it will certainly be announcing new partners in the future, but at launch, these 5 are the ones they are working with. So take that as you will. Google also told me that the first wave of Google Books will come later this fall. That's not super specific, but it also isn't that far away. In other words, this is not a tease for products that are coming out at some unknown future date when Google gets everything organized. It's reasonable to assume that these will be on store shelves before the holiday shopping season begins. So these devices are probably already in production or at the very least preparing to enter the production phase. That's really exciting. Of course, I still have so many questions. The biggest one is what processors and other specs will these machines have? Given that the operating system is Android, it's gotta be an ARM processor. But will that be Tensor? Qualcomm? If I had to guess, I would say Qualcomm is the best bet. Remember how the tagline included heavyweight power? And remember how Rick Osterloh teased Google Books during Snapdragon Summit last year and Qualcomm CEO said he had seen them already?
By the way, I've seen it. It's incredible. I think it delivers on the vision of convergence in mobile and PC. And I can't wait to have one.
Why would Qualcomm have seen a Google Book if there wasn't going to be a Snapdragon chip inside them? I'll let you do the math on that one. Anyway, there are so many other questions too. How much will they cost? Can I install apps that aren't on the Play Store? Can I emulate Windows apps like I can on a MacBook or a Linux machine? So many questions, but we'll probably learn a lot more about Google Books next week at Google I/O. I will be in Mountain View for I/O, so make sure you like and subscribe if you want to see more about this. I have high hopes about Google Books, but I'm also a little bit nervous because the Pixel desktop mode was pretty bad, which you can learn more about up here. Anyway, let me know all your thoughts on this, and I'll see you all down in the comments.